Everybody loves to be part of something, part of a community. And no matter what community you're in, there's always going to be rival communities. You can go as far back as playground arguments like which is better, Batman or Superman, or whose dad could beat up whose, to Twitter communities nowadays arguing about, well, fucking everything and anything. But what if there was a way to definitively decide which side is better? Britain is having a massive resurgence of rock music. Anything and everything around this time was dubbed Britpop. Doesn't matter if they sounded nothing alike.
Oh yeah, the pirate radio told us what was going down. What's the story, morning glory?
And the two biggest bands who were conquering Britain and Ireland were Blur and Oasis. The two bands had a bit of a back and forth between them, but were otherwise on good terms. After having the release of what was their best-selling album at the time, Parklife, Blur began working on their next album, The Great Escape. On the other hand, after Oasis's breakout album, Definitely Maybe, they began work on their second album, What's the Story, Morning Glory. Oasis were set to release a single, Roll With It, on the 14th of August. Food Records, Blur's record label, saw this and went,
Oi Damon, what you working on?
A song called Country House.
Right, watch this, it'll be well funny.
Same day release. This one move, made by a record company to drum up a bit more traction for their single, caused a whole nation to become divided. Now you had to be either Team Blur or Team Oasis, no in between. And for a lot of people, this wasn't even about the music anymore. It became about class divide. Yes, I'm not even shitting you. You see, Oasis comes from Manchester, and the two Gallagher brothers, Noel and Liam, came from a council estate, which made a lot of people, especially from the north, see them as relatable to the working class. Whilst most of Blur originated from London, which a lot of southerners related to. The clock began counting down. Whoever got more sales on release day would be considered the quote-unquote winner. In the same week that it was found out that Al-Qaeda had nuclear weapons, the thing that the media was most concerned about was Blur versus Oasis. The day came and went. People went out and voted with their wallets. By the end of the week, the results were in. Roll With It had sold 216,000 copies. Country House had sold 274,000 copies. Blur had won. And to celebrate, they featured on Top of the Pops, a UK TV show that hosts artists that had been charting recently. And as one final jab, Blur's bassist Alex James was seen sporting an Oasis t-shirt. The Battle of Britpop was one of the most influential chart battles ever. However, it was far from the last. 2007. 50 Cent was set to release his album Curtis in September. 50 Cent had already solidified himself in the industry and was confident in this album. And then here comes a little known ex-producer known as Kanye West.
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
Kanye is also very confident after his release of College Dropout and the other one that I forgot to write in. So much so that he's ready to take on 50 Cent. So he moves his release date to be on the same day as Curtis. It's happening again. This would be the most important thing to ever happen on September 11th. 50 Cent wasn't worried though. He was so not worried that he said if Kanye outsold him, he would just straight up quit music. Kanye won, and by a much larger margin. Graduation would go on to become Kanye's best-selling album and one of his most critically acclaimed. However, these sales battles don't just happen in music, they expand to all forms of media. Back in the 80s, two of the biggest properties from this time, Gremlins and Ghostbusters, had a same-day release. And despite literally both franchises milking the shit out of the movies with merchandising as did everything back in the 80s, they actually didn't think to capitalise off the same-day release. probably because these were both brand new IPs. However, we then move on to the chart battles in the world of gaming. Super Mario Odyssey versus Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Now you're probably saying, there wasn't a battle between these two, and you'd be right. Neither publisher attempted to have a battle between these two releases. But this is where the fans step in and make them fight. Two games that had nothing vaguely alike besides title were pitted against each other because of the same day release. And this is where I have a problem with these types of chart battles. People using the results to try to define which side is better. It is completely ridiculous. If we go back to Blur and Oasis, Blur fans treat this as the definitive Blur is better trump card. Even though Blur is my favourite band of all time, even I can say this is absolutely stupid. Both these songs have amazing merit, and I honestly would rate them on the same tier. Not to mention, Oasis would end up outgrowing Blur, and even that doesn't mean that Oasis is better than them. They are completely different, and your opinion is subjective. Music is one of the most subjective things in the world. Especially later on, as Blur took a very alternative approach to rock, while Oasis stayed mostly consistent. But yet chart battles like these become engraved as a decider to which is better. So much so that Blur and Oasis still get asked about this to this day.
Our editor would like to know who you think was better, you lot or Oasis?
Well, that's not a very grown-up question for Newsnight, is it?
Thankfully, things have changed in the last few years. The same day releases that used to be about competition have now become a way to bring unlikely communities together. Just at the start of the 2020 lockdown, Animal Crossing New Horizons and Doom Eternal were both set to release March 20th. However, for once, instead of pitting these two things that are nothing alike together, both communities embraced the weirdness of the situation, and it became one of the most iconic launches in video game history because the fans didn't try to pit the two against each other. It was actually quite Reddit wholesome. And it wasn't just a one-off. Barbenheimer was the most recent example, and nobody actually cared about who sold more. It was about the absurdness of having Barbie juxtaposed with I am become death, destroyer of worlds. And it's probably more beneficial as it encouraged people to see both movies. Even people who had similarities and actually got into these battles look back on them now and see that they don't have any bearing on the actual quality of the content provided. Moral of the story: use these to bring the communities together the next time one happens, rather than pit the two communities against each other. The only exception is Eminem versus Bob the Builder. Bob the Builder, sweet!